Hello, hello. All right, so we are in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11. Acts, I went too far. John, Luke, Matthew. Backing up, backing up, backing up. All right. Ooh, as I was flipping, I saw Matthew 24. That'll be exciting when we get there. We can spend a bunch of weeks talking about eschatology. But we've got like 10 plus chapters to go. We're not even halfway there yet. So, let's see here. Oh, we got to verse 6 yesterday. Just the idea where John the Baptist was offended, was confused, wasn't happy with the way Jesus was doing things. And so, we're now going to continue on with Jesus' response to the crowd who was there when John's disciples came and asked, what's going on, Jesus? Are you the one? Or are we waiting for someone else? And so verse 7 says, as they departed, Jesus began to say to the multitudes concerning John, what did you go out to see in the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? What did you go out to see? A man clothed in soft garments? Indeed, those who wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. But what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I say to you, and more than a prophet. For this is he of whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. Assuredly I say to you, among those born of women, there has not risen a greater than John the Baptist. But he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. Bum, bum, bum. All right. So, and we'll probably continue on a little bit, but he's trying to get people to remember John the Baptist and to think about him. And so this idea is, what did you expect from John when you went out to the wilderness? That's where John was preaching at, was in the wilderness. And so a reed shaken in the wind. And he's talking about someone who flip-flops back and forth. It's just this way, it's that way, it's this way. The reed just kind of moves around. And we see this example given in the Bible often about being tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, and that's something we don't want to see, guys. And let me suggest this, that if you've been raised in the church and your whole life, or for many years now, you've been taught the Bible, you feel like you understand certain things. Well, my advice to you is that if someone comes proposing the alternative, if someone all of a sudden says like, ooh, we've got the new thing, everyone else, they've missed this, but we figured it out. Well, don't be too quick to change your mind. Now, I'll even say, if I'm teaching something and it goes against something maybe you've felt really firmly about in the past, not something where like, oh, I never thought of that before. It's different when it's like, well, I thought it was this way, but, you didn't feel really grounded. You just maybe assumed. And then when someone teaches you something and explains, you're like, okay, actually that makes a lot better sense. But something that's a little bit more near and dear, something that's a core principle or a teaching you thought you understood pretty well, and someone then proposes an alternative. Well, take your time. Take your time and be a Berean, as we say, based off those Bereans we read in the book of Acts, who searched the scriptures daily. They diligently went into the scriptures to make sure that what Paul was saying was legitimate. That's your job. My job is to do my best to teach the Bible as honestly and truthfully and simply as I can, but it's your job to discern. It's not good to just kind of catch on to every YouTube video we see popping out there and, look what this guy said. Oh, look what that guy said. And there's a lot of people like that. And that wasn't John the Baptist. And so the first thing he wasn't was a reed shaken in the wind. The second thing he wasn't was a man clothed in soft garments. Because those who wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. You know, they weren't looking for a fancy guy or a guy who could put on a show. They weren't looking for someone who had a production. They weren't looking for someone who just had this, I guess, a production value. You know, I have listened to people who are amazing orators, speakers. They're very powerful with their wording. They're very inspiring and energetic. And I've also witnessed many people like, wow, wasn't that powerful? Wasn't that beautiful? Wasn't that in this soft clothing? I mean, the idea is like there's something just special. I mean, here again, it's kingly. It's, oh, wow, look at that. Like you see something lofty there. But at the end of it all, I find myself less moved because I ask the question, what did we actually take away from that? It might have been ooh and ah, but at the end of it all, I was, well, wait a minute, I don't think I actually got any actual meat out of that. Like I felt the tug on my heart, but then was there any substance to it? And John the Baptist wasn't someone putting on a show with a lack of substance. In fact, he was someone who had great substance, and he was very coarse, and he was very, I mean, he was dressed in camel skin, eating locusts, right? I mean, this guy wasn't put on any show. You weren't coming to him because it was fun. You came because you knew there was something there. There was a message. There was meat. There was truth being shared, even if it's by a guy who did it in kind of an out there kind of a way. And so, what did you go out to see? A prophet. Yes, I say to you, and more than a prophet. So that's what they went to see. They weren't looking for things that flip-flopped or with no assurity. John was sure of it. He didn't flip-flop. They weren't looking for a show. They were looking for truth. They were looking for a prophet. It's funny because I've heard many great quotes about how, you know, people don't like prophets. People don't like prophets because the idea is that a prophet says it like it is. And people don't always like that. The prophet tells you the truth even when the truth hurts. And people don't like that. And so, he is the one of whom is written, right? Before I send my message before your face, who will prepare a way before you. That's Malachi chapter 3, and it talks about the spirit of Elijah, and that's actually coming up here. So he's prophesying the last prophecy of the Old Testament is that God would send Elijah, a prophet who would prepare the way for the Messiah. And so he says that born of women, there's no one greater than John. Why? I mean, Isaiah? Jeremiah? Daniel? Well, the reason is because those men all spoke afar off of the Messiah. But John, he was actually able to point to him, to touch him, and even to baptize him. And so he had a unique and special ministry. And so verse 12 says, and from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and by violence, and the violent take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. Now here's an interesting thing, because we see prophecy in the New Testament, but it is somewhat different. And I've done long teachings on this, and I'm not going to do a long teaching on that today. But if you go to 1 Corinthians 14, Sunday night at our church, we did an hour and a half sermon, my longest sermon on a Sunday night. But we talked a lot about prophecy and the gift of prophecy in modern day and how it does look different from the Old Testament. And it's because all the prophets prophesied until John. Really, the prophets of old one of the main things they did was foresaw the coming of the Messiah. Now, he's already come. So we don't have that prophecy anymore. We have other types of prophecy. And again, that's a story for another day. You'll have to find out on your own or ask a question sometime. But if you are willing to receive it, he is Elijah who is to come. Now, Matthew 17, verse 11. Why do the scribes say Elijah must come first? Sorry, verse 10, I actually backed up. Jesus answered and said to them, indeed, Elijah is coming first and will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah has come already, and they did not know him. Elijah is coming, but Elijah has come. Kind of fascinating, right? Well, if you go to Revelation 11 and look at the two witnesses there, more than likely one of those two witnesses is Elijah. Who's the second witness? Well, there's two popular camps, Moses and Enoch. And there's some great arguments for both of them. And we can talk about which one's which another day, or you can go back and find my Daily Bread on the two witnesses. That was a popular one on YouTube. People comment on that one a bunch with some really whacked out ideas. Man, talk about end times, people come out of the crazy places. Anyway, but the idea is Jesus basically said that John the Baptist did have the spirit of Elijah upon him. That's what Gabriel told Zechariah, that John the Baptist would have the spirit of Elijah. And yet Jesus then seems to allude in chapter 17 that but Elijah is still coming. So that prophecy was not completely fulfilled in John the Baptist, just like the Messiah came and came again. And there are messianic prophecies fulfilled in the first coming and messianic prophecies fulfilled in the second coming. There's a first and second coming of Elijah. And the first coming is a man anointed with the spirit and power of Elijah. And so, if you're willing to receive it, he is Elijah who is to come. He who has ears, let him hear. But to what shall I liken this generation? It's like children sitting in the marketplace, calling out to their companions, saying, we played flute for you, you did not dance. We mourned for you, you did not lament. John came neither eating nor drinking, and they said, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and say, look, a glutton and a winebibber, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is justified by her children. These last few verses are basically just describing an unsatisfiable fickleness in the people. They weren't happy with anything. And that spirit's alive in the church today as well. Covered a lot more than I expected. So all these kind of side teachings. But really with them, right, John the Baptist didn't drink wine, he stayed away from luxuries and all these types of things. And people are like, oh, well, something's wrong with that guy. So Jesus came and, he focused on just hanging out with people, eating, Oh, he's got a demon. It's back and forth, right? The glutton, the demon. And today we see very similar in the church. People have got a problem with every church they go to. And they hop, and they hop, and they hop, and they hop. They go here for 4 months. They go there for 6 months. They go there for a month. They keep jumping around until they find the church that will teach them what they want to hear. But rather than that, pray and just find a church where you think they're teaching the Bible and no other agenda. This is the church where I'm going to grow because they're going to challenge me and teach me the Word of God. And I might not like what I hear, but remember I told you, if you hear something that challenges something you've believed in the past, we'll take the time to study it before you flip sides. But let me say this, guys, is also when you hear something that is different and it's a well-made argument and it comes from a reliable source, well, take time to study it before you reject it too. Because I've watched people follow along and even love my teaching and others, who teach similar to me. Oh, but then we hit one thing and it's like, oh, that's a hill I'm going to die on. And then they end up like leaving because it's like, well, I can't stay there because they don't believe in this one thing or these two things. And it's like, you know what? Either one, man, if everything else is good and there's just this one thing, I mean, if it's not something you really have to like, it's heretical. If it's not that, then, well, just learn to get by and not worry about that one thing or two things. But on the flip side, if it's something, maybe they're right. If this is a trusted source and someone you thought has been doing a good job of teaching the Bible thus far, now we get to the thing that challenges you. Well, maybe it is true. And so it's kind of a twofold thing. Don't quickly switch sides like the reed shaking in the wind, where I just believe everything I'm told every time I hear it. But on the flip side too, don't just reject something right off the bat if it seems like it's coming from a good source without taking the time to study it yourself and make sure. And so these guys weren't happy with anything. That's the kids. We played the flute, you did not dance. We mourned, you didn't lament. It's basically saying, we tried this, we tried happy, you didn't like happy. You tried sad, you didn't like sad. And some people are just fickle. And that's quite often the case in the world we live in today, is people are very fickle. They just aren't happy with anything. Didn't like that, don't like that, nope, that's too much this, that's too much that. And it's like, listen here, Goldilocks. Suck it up and eat your porridge. It's good for you. Don't worry. Too soft. Too hard, But that's the point. It's just, I don't know, we made like 10 points today. I don't even know how to summarize today in one thought. But, hey, stay in the Word. Establish what you believe and why you believe it, and stick it out and keep going hard for Jesus. That summarizes things well. Or just take a lesson from Enrique and learn to suck it up and stay at Revival Church. That works for me too. All right, guys. You guys take care. And I will see you guys all bright and early tomorrow morning. Adios.